He walked in with a cake, expecting love. Instead, he heard her laugh. God, I hope he crashes. She wished him dead. In that moment, everything changed. But what was he going to do about it? I had no idea what was coming when I walked into that house, cake in hand, expecting a surprise that would light up Abigail's face. I had driven 9 hours through a snowstorm for this moment, braving icy roads, accidents, and the creeping fatigue that had started to set in around hour 6. Every mile I pushed through was for her. For the woman I loved. Her birthday. Her one day. I had it all planned out. The cake, her favorite from that little bakery we both loved, the dinner reservation at the restaurant I had fought to get for weeks. I even packed her favorite dress. I was going to sweep her off her feet, remind her of why we were together. But the moment I stepped into Mia's house, everything shifted. I had parked a block away, trudging through snow that came up past my ankles. By the time I reached the front door, my jeans were soaked, my hands frozen from gripping the cake box so tightly. I was so close, so damn close to making it all right. I was going to hold her, let her know I hadn't forgotten, that the distance between us in the last few months hadn't meant anything to me. I still cared. I still loved her. But when I stood there, about to knock on the door, something froze me in place. I heard their voices. Abigail's voice, light and easy, laced with something I hadn't heard in months, disdain. God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance. The words pierced through me like a blade. I didn't move at first. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe I misheard. But then Mia's voice replied, or at least a few months of silence. They laughed. They laughed about me, about my life, about my death, and the only thing I could think about was how I'd driven all this way, how I'd braved this storm, for a woman who was mocking me, wishing me gone. It hit me like a freight train. In that moment, all the effort I had put into trying to keep us together seemed like a cruel joke. Without thinking, I pushed the door open. Abigail's face went pale when she saw me standing there, the cake still in my hands, a grim smile frozen on my lips. She opened her mouth, her voice trembling as she stammered my name. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, setting the cake down on the counter. I could feel their eyes burning into my back, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of that house. I didn't say a word as I walked through the door, slamming it behind me. The snow had started to fall again, heavier than before, as if nature itself had decided to bury the reality of what I'd just heard. My car was still parked a block away, but I couldn't bring myself to go back to it immediately. I sat in the entryway of Mia's house, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. There were 17 missed calls from Abigail, 38 texts. I ignored them all. I drove to the nearest motel, a dingy place that smelled like cigarettes and loneliness. I paid $80 for a room where the TV didn't work, but the silence was deafening enough to drown out the noise in my mind. I didn't turn my phone back on until the next morning, when I saw the sheer desperation of Abigail's messages. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what she had said. There was only confusion, guilt, and accusations, followed by more manipulation. She tried to tell me it was a joke, that I was overreacting, but I knew the truth now. And it hurt in a way I couldn't explain. That afternoon, I called my friend Theodore. Something happened with Abigail, I texted him. I need a place to crash for a few days. Theo, being the MVP he is, replied with a simple message, doors unlocked, beers in the fridge. And that was it. My life, as I knew it, had come to a crashing halt. The woman I had spent 7 years with, the woman I had thought I understood better than anyone, had revealed herself to be someone else entirely. I spent the next few days in a daze, piecing together the shattered remnants of my life. I never went back to Mia's. I never responded to Abigail's frantic calls. Instead, I drove back home to pack my things, 3 suitcases filled with clothes and essentials, and took what mattered most, my important documents. I couldn't help but think about how easily everything had fallen apart. The dreams I had of us growing old together, of raising a family, of taking vacations that weren't just about escape but about enjoying each other. How could I have been so wrong? It wasn't just the words Abigail had said. It was everything. The realization that all my efforts had meant nothing. That I was nothing more than a placeholder in her life, a person to get through the days with. But there was something even more unsettling. I knew I had to make a decision. I had to figure out what to do next. But something darker crept into my thoughts. What if I didn't want to forgive her? What if I never wanted to hear from her again? What if I wanted revenge for the way she treated me? I wasn't sure what would happen, but I knew that the man who had walked into that house, cake in hand, was gone. The question now was, what was I going to become next? It's strange, how quickly things can unravel. One moment, I'm sitting there, piecing my life back together, feeling like a ghost in my own home. The next, I'm making plans, taking steps, and transforming into someone I don't fully recognize. It's like the anger built up in me had nowhere else to go but forward. It was no longer just about Abigail's betrayal. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost: my trust, my dignity, my peace of mind. After I got back to Theo's, I threw myself into a routine. I started working remotely, just like I'd told my boss, but it wasn't for a family emergency, it was for me. I needed to focus, to figure out what to do next, without her clouding my thoughts. Every text, every missed call from Abigail, felt like a rope trying to pull me back into something I was no longer sure I wanted. I spent the next couple of days researching divorce lawyers, setting up consultations. There was one name that kept popping up in my searches, a woman named Diana LeClaire, known for being tough and strategic. She wasn't afraid to fight for her clients, and that's exactly what I needed. I made an appointment with her for the following week. But before I met her, I did something that made me feel uneasy. I decided to visit the house. Not because I wanted to talk to Abigail. Not because I missed her. But because there were things I needed to see, things I needed to understand. I had to know how far her betrayal went. If I was going to walk away, I needed closure. Real closure. I parked across the street, keeping my distance at first. I didn't want anyone to see me. My heart pounded as I watched the house, imagining what Abigail might be doing inside. The tension was unbearable, but I needed to do this. I had to. Finally, I got out of the car, my breath visible in the cold evening air. I had left a spare key under the porch mat the last time I stayed at the house. I never thought I'd need it. But there I was, unlocking the door, stepping inside, and realizing how much had changed. The place felt like a ghost town. The smell of her perfume still lingered, but it wasn't enough to erase the weight of what I had learned. I wandered through the room slowly, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. When I got to our bedroom, the sight hit me like a truck. There, on the bedside table, was a photo frame. But it wasn't a picture of us. It was a picture of her and Noah, the guy she had been spending so much time with lately. The man I had been hearing about more and more but never fully believed was anything more than a passing distraction. There it was, her smiling face next to his, their arms wrapped around each other in a way I had never seen her with me. I froze. That was the moment I realized how deep this betrayal ran. It wasn't just words anymore. It wasn't just her jokes about my death or the silent disregard for what I had done. This was something else entirely. She had already moved on. I grabbed the photo and stared at it for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. But the more I thought about it, the more my anger started to shift. I wasn't just angry at her anymore, I was angry at myself. How did I miss all the signs? How did I let this happen? I turned the photo face down and dropped it on the floor, my hands trembling with rage. I left the room, walked through the rest of the house, and then I stopped in the kitchen. The cake I had bought for her birthday was still sitting there, untouched. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had driven 9 hours through a snowstorm, driven by love and hope. And here it was, a cake for a marriage that had ended before I even knew it was over. I had to leave before I lost control. I stepped out of the house, locking the door behind me, and got back into my car. My head was spinning, my stomach tied in knots. But as I drove back to Theo's, something inside me clicked. I wasn't done yet. I had spent years trying to make this work, trying to prove my worth to Abigail, to the people who had started to make me feel less than I was. I had allowed myself to be invisible, to be the man who did everything for others but never asked for anything in return. And now, with every text and every call I ignored, I felt like I was shedding my old self. I wasn't the same man who had walked out of that house the night I overheard Abigail's cruel words. No, I was someone else now. Someone who wouldn't settle for being forgotten. I didn't just want my freedom. I wanted something more. Something that would make Abigail regret the way she treated me. Something that would show her how far she pushed me. I had a plan. A plan that would make her see that I was no longer the fool she could laugh at. The question was, what would I do with it? The days after I visited the house were a blur. I didn't tell Theo everything. He'd been a solid friend, never pushing me for details, but I could tell he was starting to worry. He was the one who kept the fridge stocked, who poured the beers and nodded along when I needed to vent. But I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. I had to be methodical, calculated. I needed a strategy. A way to take control of my life again. I knew Abigail was calling. I could feel her desperation through every voicemail, every text. She tried everything. She cried, she yelled, she begged. The first message had a guilt-tripping tone. I can't believe you left like that. What happened to us? You're overreacting. Then came the defensiveness. It was just a joke. You can't take a joke? A few hours later, the angry ones started rolling in. Why are you ignoring me? Stop being childish. And of course, the manipulation. I'm so worried about you. Please, let's talk. I don't know what I'll do if you don't pick up. Not once did she acknowledge what she had said about hoping I crashed. Not once did she acknowledge the betrayal. And that realization stung more than anything. I kept blocking her number, but she found ways around it. Calling from a friend's phone, from a work number, from numbers I didn't recognize. It didn't matter. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't the same man who had walked away from that night with the cake. The man who thought he could work through it. No, this new version of me wasn't looking for reconciliation. This new me wanted something else entirely. I scheduled the meeting with Diana LeClaire. I needed someone who could give me the tools to navigate this new world of mine, a world where trust had been shattered and I was alone. Diana was sharp, calculating, and knew how to handle people like Abigail. The first meeting was a blur. I told her everything, the long nights of wondering, the late-night thoughts of revenge that had begun to creep in. She didn't judge me. She simply listened. At the end of it, she handed me a thick packet of paperwork, outlining the steps we'd take. Divorce, asset division, and most importantly, how to protect myself from Abigail's attempts to manipulate the narrative. But that wasn't the only thing on my mind. Something else had begun to simmer beneath the surface. I spent the next few days going through our financials, digging into the accounts Abigail had control over. She had always been the one to handle the bills, the shopping, the credit cards. But now, as I looked at the bank statements and credit card charges, something didn't add up. She had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt over the past year, most of it on online shopping, things I hadn't even known about. I sat there for hours, piecing it all together. The evidence was clear. She had been living beyond our means, sinking us further into debt while criticizing everything we had. The house wasn't big enough. The cars weren't new enough. My career wasn't impressive enough. It was as if she had been living a double life. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just about her betrayal. This wasn't just about the mockery and the cruelty. Abigail had been planning for this, for a life where she could take what she wanted without regard for the consequences. And now, I had the ammunition to stop it. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. This was no longer about repairing what had been broken. This was about taking back control. About standing up for myself. About making sure that I wouldn't be the one left with the wreckage. But it wasn't enough to just walk away. That wouldn't be enough. I needed her to understand what she had lost. I needed her to realize that everything she had destroyed could never be fixed. And so, I made a decision. I moved money. I moved half of our joint savings into an account in just my name. I froze our joint credit cards, locking her out. I changed the passwords on everything: bank accounts, social media, email. I was leaving nothing to chance. Abigail hadn't called me for a few days, but when she did, it was different. There was panic in her voice. "Why can't I access the account?" she demanded. "What did you do?" I let the silence stretch before I answered. "I'm not going to be your safety net anymore. You'll have to figure it out on your own." There was a long pause. Then came the threats. "You can't do this to me. I'll report you for fraud if you don't fix this." I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The manipulation didn't work. And I didn't have to listen. I hung up. The plan was set in motion, and now, all I had to do was wait. Wait for her to panic. Wait for her to lash out. And when she did, I would be ready. I wasn't the man who would beg for her love anymore. I wasn't the man who would beg for anything. I was the man who would make sure she regretted what she had done. The days stretched on, each one heavier than the last, as I watched the world I had once built with Abigail slowly begin to crumble. Her calls became more frequent, more desperate, but I remained unshaken. I had made my choice, and now there was no turning back. I knew she was panicking. Her world, which had once revolved around her manipulation, her control, was slipping from her grasp. She had no idea how deep I had dug, how much I had uncovered. The foundation of lies she had built was slowly disintegrating, piece by piece, under the weight of her own greed and arrogance. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. My friends, my co-workers, even Theodore, everyone saw the shift. I wasn't the same guy who had walked away from that house months ago, uncertain and heartbroken. I was different now. I had a purpose. Every move I made now felt like a chess piece being placed, one step closer to the checkmate. It was a Friday when she finally came to me in person. I had just finished a long day of work, sitting in my favorite chair, staring at the piles of paperwork that had become my life. My mind was consumed with thoughts of what was next, what she would do when the truth hit her. I had spent so much of my life worrying about her feelings, her happiness, but now it was about me. About my future. Then there was a knock at the door. I opened it without thinking, and there she stood, Abigail, disheveled, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. She wasn't the confident, cold woman I had known for so many years. She was a shell of the person I had once loved. "Please, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't get into the accounts." "What did you do?" I looked at her, standing there, and for a moment, I didn't even recognize her. This was the woman who had so casually mocked me, the woman who had wished me dead just months ago. And now, she was pleading. Begging for something I wasn't sure I could give her anymore. "I told you this was coming," I replied, my voice steady, colder than I intended. "You've spent years taking me for granted. And now, it's my turn." Her eyes searched mine, looking for any trace of the man she once knew. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. It was a joke. You've got to understand. It wasn't like that." I shook my head slowly. "No, Abigail. It wasn't just that one moment. It's everything. It's the lies. The betrayal. You've been running a game for so long, and I was too blind to see it." She reached out, her hand trembling, as if trying to touch me, but I stepped back. "Please," she begged, "we can fix this. I'll do anything." The desperation in her voice hit something deep inside me, but it wasn't the sorrow I expected. It wasn't the love I thought I'd feel in that moment. Instead, it was a cold, hollow satisfaction. I had been waiting for this. Waiting for her to realize the depth of what she had lost. Waiting for her to understand that this time, I wasn't going to fix it. "You can't fix this," I said, my voice hardening. "It's too late for that. You've already made your choice." She stepped back, her face contorted in a mixture of anger and regret. But I didn't care. The woman who had stood in front of me a year ago, so sure of herself, was gone. She was replaced by a woman who had finally seen the consequences of her actions. "I don't want your money," I continued, speaking slowly, deliberately. "I don't want your apologies. You want to fix something? Start with yourself. Fix your life. Figure out who you are without me." The words hung in the air between us, and for a long moment, she didn't say anything. Her tears were the only response. "Don't come back here again," I said. "We're done." I closed the door before she could say anything more. I heard her muffled sobs through the thin wood, but I didn't flinch. The world I had once known was gone, and the only thing that mattered now was moving forward. That night, I sat down with the lawyer, Diana. She went over the financials, the assets, everything that would be divided in the divorce. But this time, it wasn't just about what I was going to get. It was about what she would lose. What Abigail had built up in her lies, her manipulation, her entitlement, it would all be stripped away. The house? Mine. The savings? Mine. The credit cards? Frozen. The life we had built? Gone. I made the decision to push for everything. I wasn't going to let her off easy. Not this time. She had taken advantage of me for too long, and now, it was time to make her face the reality of what she had done. And as I signed the paperwork, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of someone who had finally taken back control. The calm of someone who was no longer willing to be the victim in his own story. But there was something else, something darker. A part of me that wanted to see her crash. A part of me that wanted to watch as her perfect world collapsed in on itself. I wasn't proud of it. But I couldn't deny it. I thought the hardest part would be facing Abigail, but as the days passed, I realized it wasn't her I was running from, it was the person I had become in the process. The man who was capable of walking away from a marriage, from a life, without a second thought. The man who, once driven by love and loyalty, had shifted into someone bent on retribution. But I didn't regret it. Not when I saw the first sign of how everything was falling apart for her. It came in the form of a text, one I had anticipated but hoped would never come. A final desperate plea: "I'll make things right. We can fix this, Griffin. Please, I've learned my lesson. Let's try again." It was an apology without any accountability. She didn't ask how she could make things better, she asked me to erase the past, to pretend like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Abigail had pushed me into a corner where I no longer saw the woman I loved. I saw a liar. A manipulator. Someone who had wrapped her life in half-truths, letting me believe in something that wasn't real, something that didn't exist except in my mind. I still had the cake. The cake I had brought all that way, expecting a celebration, expecting a future. I hadn't thrown it away, and it had sat untouched in my kitchen ever since. I wasn't sure what it meant to me anymore. The cake wasn't the problem. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the fact that I had given everything to someone who couldn't even see me for what I was. In the following days, I went to work, took long walks, kept myself busy. But the thoughts of what I had left behind, of how I was slowly becoming a stranger in my own life, kept coming back. I wasn't just walking away from Abigail. I was walking away from my own idealism. The version of myself that believed in loyalty, that believed that love could survive anything, even the darkest of betrayals. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, papers in hand, I was ready for the next step. It was going to be messy, but it would be clean. I would walk away from everything I had built with Abigail, and I would build something new, something that was entirely mine. And I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, more late-night phone calls with Diana, and countless texts and emails between me and Abigail's legal team. But through all of it, something shifted. I stopped being angry. I stopped waiting for the world to right itself. And then one evening, Abigail showed up at my door. She didn't knock this time. She didn't try to sneak in through a back window. She stood there, right in front of me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "Griffin," she whispered. "I know what you're doing. And I get it. I do. But please, this isn't who we are. We were good together. Don't let the money and the lies ruin what we had." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the woman I used to love. She was broken. She was desperate. She was vulnerable. But I wasn't the same man who had walked into that house all those months ago. I wasn't the man who would have gone running back. The anger, the frustration, the hurt, it had all turned into something else. Something cold. And that was when I realized the truth. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from myself. The person I had been, the person I thought I was gone. "I can't do this," I said. "Not anymore. I don't recognize you anymore, Abigail. And I'm not sure if I ever did." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I had tried to fix things. I had tried to be the man who understood. But now, I was the man who had finally understood the cost of loyalty. The price of love. She tried to reach out, her hand trembling. "Please, Griffin." But I stepped back, shaking my head. "No. This is over." And with that, I closed the door. The finality of the action was something I had longed for. The last piece of control was mine. I never saw Abigail again after that night. Her name faded from my phone. Her messages stopped. I moved forward, one day at a time, rebuilding what she had broken. It wasn't easy. The silence was heavy. The loneliness was crushing. But there was a strange satisfaction in knowing that I was finally free. And then, one day, I realized something. I hadn't just moved on. I hadn't just rebuilt. I had learned to forgive myself. Because I had let go of the need to fix everything. I didn't need closure anymore. I didn't need her to validate me. I had finally found peace in my own choices, in the fact that I had decided what kind of man I would be. In the end, that was all I had. And that was enough.